right, so how's the Bank's Royal Commission coming along? It looks as if AMP is feeling the heat ahead of the rest just at the moment.
Oh, at the moment it does, for sure. It's just a disaster for the government as far as I can see. I thought that the piece of the week, the best piece of the week on this was Peter Martin's piece on Thursday in the Fairfax papers, where he detailed at great length how the government had run interference for the banks through, from when Labor tried to bring in the future financial advice reforms, and how Matthias Cormann in particular, but the government in general, did their very best to kibosh it. So it seems to me that for them to throw up their hands now and say, "Oh, this is a terrible shock to us. We didn't know this kind of stuff was going on," is just unbelievable. I mean, they may not, no one knew the specifics, but there was enough stuff out there already for us to know that there was some really bad stuff going down in the financial sector, and the government was doing its level best to protect those people from scrutiny.
Would they have had in mind all along that they want the company tax cuts to get through? That's their formula in terms of getting the economy going. But they might have appreciated that to shine a spotlight on the banks like this is going to make it harder to get those company tax cuts through.
And to think the two aren't linked, we might talk about politics all day, but people, voters dedicate a very small allocation of their time each day, and you can't have, one story saying this is what the banks are doing, and then, 5 minutes later, we're trying to give them a company tax cut. Those two things are related, and although Darren Hinch, you've said he suggested the horse trading, he's always been against this for that very reason, because, his argument is you cannot have a Royal Commission into the banks whilst delivering them a tax cut. And I think that really resonates with people at home. They don't like the banks. This behaviour has been outrageous. We've now got the government admitting that there's, they should have done it sooner. And it plays into that. They're up against a huge brick wall now trying to do
Like it or not, though, people are invested in the banks in many ways and many levels. They have their money there, their superannuation investments are there, so it is a very important pillar of our economy. What they've done is reprehensible and unforgivable. I'm interested in the politics of it. I'm definitely interested in the connection between the banks getting a big corporate tax cut and the way that they're conducting themselves, their culture and their priorities. But the blood sport interview last week, Barry, with Kelly O'Dwyer was just so revealing, because there's a minister who's stuck with a seasoned interviewer with the PMO's talking points. But if you look and held the line, and then when Malcolm Turnbull tried to massage the message a day later.
Yeah, just before you go on, let's hear him doing that, because this is what he had to say in Europe after that Kelly O'Dwyer interview.
Politically, all of the political commentators are right when they say politically we would have been better off setting one up earlier, but as it's turned out, I think we've put customers first, we've put substantial reform first, and we've got a lot of legislation and reform passed, already it's law, that would not have been able to have been done if a Royal Commission had been set up 2 years ago.
So a couple of things about that. I mean, you political commentators are right, damned with faint praise. It's all about politics. Well, no, it's not. But as Annika just said, and also to say that we put these tough reforms in place first. Well, he did have a suite of reforms that they argued over two years, and a lot of them are now unnecessary. The theatre of having the bank bosses walk before the Economics Committee, well, it's redundant. They did that, and none of these things
it's shown to have been
out.
It's shown to have been a sham.
Exactly.
The bank bosses came there, no one knocked a chip off them.
No.
Correct.
Now they've gone to the Royal Commission, and we see what the truth is.
So the big reforms were actually put in place just 2 weeks ago, after the hearings began. The tough ones, the increased penalties, the increased jail sentences, the things that are likely to deter people didn't come till after the Commission hearings began.
Except that the really important thing here is to get regulators that actually regulate. I mean, what deters people, and there's lots of psychological research on this, it's not the size of the penalty, it's the likelihood of being caught.
Yeah.
And the likelihood of being caught, if you're in the financial sector in recent times in Australia, was bugger all, pardon my language. ASIC just did not... They ran one criminal prosecution in 10 years and six civil cases, I think. I mean, that's pathetic.
Just before we leave the topic of whether they were right or wrong, and the argument over that, Kelly O'Dwyer, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, has now expressed herself in this way.
Many people have asked why it is that the government opposed a Royal Commission for so long, and it is a legitimate question. With the benefit of hindsight, we should have called it earlier, and I'm sorry we didn't. And I regret not saying this when asked earlier this week. The government did get the timing wrong.
See, that's what she wanted to say to you on Sunday. Instead, she was like a shooting gallery duck, as Butch Cassidy just pinged her. So, because of the talking points she'd been given. But see, Kelly O'Dwyer was actually the first minister to propose the Royal Commission in discussions with her cabinet colleagues, Barry O'Sullivan, who pushes. Let's not forget that we've only got a Royal Commission because there was going to be an uprising on the coalition backbench. We haven't got it for any other honourable, virtuous, policy objective. They were going to keep constructing this jerry-built infrastructure to apply to the banks until they couldn't do it any longer. And they couldn't do it any longer because there was an uprising on the backbenches. And Kelly O'Dwyer was the one.
And it was new people. It was Lou O'Brien. It wasn't just, Wacker. They were recruiting numbers by the sort of minute. And this was, of course, when Barnaby was fighting his re-election. So, it was going back to that time, we sort of forget that it was such a small minority and they had no choice. The government had no choice but to do this.
And Kelly O'Dwyer was the first minister to argue for it in the cabinet. And yet, out of duty...
It's unfortunate that she was the one who got put up there to take the shot.
With the target on the forehead.
Well, now that they're getting, force-fed this material every day now out of the Royal Commission, they're focusing on the customers now. And it looks as if the question of compensation is one that the government will deal with. Here's the Prime Minister again.
Where banks have done the wrong thing, they must pay compensation. There's no question about that, Dennis. And we have set up a new one-stop shop, Financial Complaints Authority, which is going to be able to deal with that. We are determined to ensure that where people have been wronged, that they are able to get compensation and able to do it in an efficient way.
All right, so we expect something on that front.